Hey ladies, can you hear me okay? Okay, that's good news. Audio, video works. Okay, so I'm gonna give the three of you co-host capability. Kaylee, you are co-host. Isabella, your co-host. And then Beatrice, co-host. Your co-host now.
I'll let Millie.
Sorry?
Millie's in the waiting room. Can I let her in?
Yep, and let Grace in as well, please. And then I'll make them co-host. And then one thing I did forget about was I need a timekeeper. So just to really ensure I'm on schedule, is anyone comfortable being a timekeeper for me? Just to like flag for me, like, hey, you're a minute or two over, and you can interrupt me during the event. You'll have to access the planning document that really outlines the agenda. And I don't want to put it in the chat because I don't know if everyone will have access to this. So whoever wants to do it, what I can do is email it to you real quick.
I can do that.
Was that Millie?
No, it was Isabella.
Isabella, okay. Thank you, Isabella. All right, I am sending it over to you now. I'm gonna do my best not to like go over time and kind of keep track on my end as well. I'm gonna let Grace in. Hey Grace, I am gonna give you co-host capability. All right, so I'm gonna review one more time, maybe the rule. Do you guys know your roles? Do you guys feel good about it? Because I can't remember who's monitoring the chat and all that good stuff. Okay, thank you. I'm gonna share my screen real quick so I can get all situated.
So let's just say, like, if we had to remove somebody from the meeting, how do you do that? I've never had to do that.
Good question. Let's see here. So I don't
think we can remove host, but when Millie was in and I clicked on her name on participants, there's like this tab that says more and it says remove. Like if she's not a co-host, we can remove her. Like if you want to try that out.
Because I just tried to remove one of you guys, but you're all co-hosts, so I don't see that option. So maybe mess with it. Don't remove anyone, but maybe mess with it when we enter people that are not hosts and see if you see at least that option.
So like I do see that option for Millie. When I click on the three dots, it does say remove under Millie. So is she not set as a co-host? Because like with Isabella, I don't see that.
I don't think I
So
would.
maybe we need to set Millie as a co-host.
Yeah. No,
should be good.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's better.
All right. So Isabella, you're letting people in from the waiting room, right? That's your role. Okay. I'm going to share my screen. And once I get that all set up, you could start letting people in, okay?
And we can turn off our videos. Is that okay?
Welcome to everyone who has joined us so far. We are going to wait a few more minutes for everyone to gather in, and then we'll get started. Hi, everyone who's joined us so far. I'm going to give it maybe one more minute because we have folks coming in from the waiting room, and then we'll get started. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So before I begin with introductions and talk about who we are, I just want to review a few community guidelines. First thing first, this is going to be recorded and live streamed through Facebook, through Young Invincibles Facebook account. So we recommend keeping your video off, especially if you're not comfortable sharing your image. I will also ask that everyone remains muted throughout the course of the webinar, and we will direct you otherwise if we ask you to unmute yourself. But other than that, I think what we're going to do is just utilize the chat function. So if you do have any questions that come up throughout the webinar, our Young Invincible staff is going to be monitoring the chat throughout the course of the event. Feel free to utilize the chat and ask any questions or provide any insight or comments in the chat. And lastly, we are going to be sharing a mental health resource guide that has been put together by Young Adults in our programming as a follow-up to the event. All right. So a little bit about our agenda for today. I'm going to take a deep dive and let you guys know who Young Invincibles is. We're going to do a quick icebreaker to get you feeling comfortable about learning about who we are and what we're talking about today. And just because mental health is a very heavy topic, so we wanted to do something a little bit light. We are going to hear directly from young adults, and they're going to be brave and share their young adult story with us regarding mental health. You're going to learn a little bit more about YI's mental health initiatives. We're going to give you some time to ask any questions or discuss, and then we're going to wrap up our event. All right. And if everyone could give me 1 second, I'm going to see if we are live real quick on Facebook. All right, maybe we're not live, which is totally okay. If you know of anyone that wants to watch the recording of the event, it is being recorded for sure, so we'll share that out as a follow-up as well. So let's jump in. Who is Young Invincibles? First and foremost, my name is Cameron Behill. I am the Rocky Mountain Engagement Manager here in our Colorado office. Young Invincibles is a national organization that works with young adults to ensure that their voices are heard during the political process. And we work pretty hard to expand economic opportunity for that younger generation. Here in Colorado, we work with a little bit younger demographic. We actually work with 16 and 17-year-olds in addition to 18 to 34-year-olds. But that's typically how we describe young adults at YI. So because we're a policy and research nonprofit, that means we do a lot of work policy-wise on the local, state, and federal level. So our core buckets of issue areas include higher education, healthcare, workforce, and civic engagement. And today you'll hear a little bit more about healthcare and higher education because that's where mental health falls in with our initiatives here in our Colorado office. So we have chapters located across the United States. Our headquarters is actually located in Washington, D.C., where our organization was first founded by a couple of Georgetown law students. Since then, in 2009, we have expanded our chapters more across the United States, including California, Colorado, Texas, New York, and Illinois. And then we have a smaller office in Virginia as well. So this is the framework that we work within. We first and foremost want to build a community of young leaders to take action for social change. We're well known for sharing and elevating the stories of young adults to ensure that whether it's in higher education, healthcare, civic engagement, or workforce, they're being heard and that we're sharing their experiences with decision makers and the media. We participate in cutting edge policy research and analysis, and then we provide tools for the younger generation to ensure that they're making smart economic choices. We run a few young adult and youth engagement programs throughout the year. The list on your screen is a list of programs we run specifically here in Colorado. So we have the Young Advocates program, which is actually ran through pretty much all of our regional offices as well. We have a regional and national youth advisory board, which again, most of our regional offices have a youth advisory board. Here in Colorado, we specifically have the Denver Youth Leadership Academy, which we partner to run with the Denver Opportunity Youth Initiative based out of the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce. And then we also overlook our alumni network because once young adults graduate from our programming, we want to ensure that they stay engaged. So let me share a little bit more about our Young Advocates program. We typically offer this during the fall and spring semesters. Because we're an organization that works with young adults, I think we naturally attract college students. And so we want to be mindful that a lot of these young adults in our programming are most likely college students. And so typically in a cohort, we have anywhere between 12 to 25 young adults. Now, pre-COVID, we had around 12 to 15 young adults in our programming. But since COVID hit, we had to quickly adapt and move our program online. And that actually gave us a little bit more flexibility to offer our programming here in Colorado to more locations in the state. So right now, we actually have about 23 young adults in our program, in our Young Advocates program. Half of them are from around the Denver metro area, and then half of them are from Southern Colorado, particularly Pueblo, Colorado. They get around 50 hours of training and hands-on work, and they're paid $15 an hour. So our young adults in our programming, they again receive trainings and they engage with other young adults to advocate for policy changes that are important for them in their communities. Based on feedback that we received back in 2017, 2018, we decided to focus exclusively on campus mental health during our 2019 young advocates cohorts. And so time and time again in 2017 and 2018, we kept hearing that mental health is really important to them. They're having mental health struggles, they're having issues accessing services or resources. And again, because of our demographic, a lot of our young adults were attending college at that time. And so during our 2019 cohorts, we exclusively worked on policy changes at the institutional level with multiple higher education institutions to change some mental health policies on their college campuses. And I'm going to get a little bit more into that here in a bit. So now that you know a little bit more about Young Invincibles and our Young Advocates program and a little bit more about our Young Adult Engagement programs, what I would like us to do is to do a quick icebreaker. I would love to know who has joined us today. So in the chat, if you could type your name, your pronouns, where you're joining from, and if you're a dog or cat person. Now, if you don't like dogs or cats and you have another preferred animal like a goldfish, that's totally fine. You could put that in there as well. But I put my example in the slide so you could see Cameron V. Hill, she, hers. I'm currently located in Parker, Colorado, and I'm a dog person. So if everyone could put your introductions into the chat real quick, we'll take a few moments and I will read a few out. All right, I think mostly everyone has shared something. So I'm going to read where folks are joining from and whether they're a dog or a cat person. So we got Denver, Lakewood. Someone said all animals, Longmont, dog, 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 dog. We have someone from Frederick, Sterling. We got Cat Forever, Lakewood, both. We got folks from Pueblo. See lots of dog people, guys. Oh, we have someone from Arizona. Welcome. We have folks from California, Greeley, Grand Lake, Longmont, Westminster, Thornton, Aurora, Highlands Ranch. More California folks. Welcome, everyone. And yes, I think we need some more cat representation, but I'm going to agree with the dog people. I'm a dog person. All right. Now, up next, we are going to welcome our guest presenter. I'm going to go to the next slide. Sarah, are you on with us? As I mentioned in our engagement email, we are welcoming Emerson Street. Emerson Street for Teens and Young Adults is based out of Mental Health Center of Denver. And Sarah is an education specialist and an academic liaison. So Sarah will be joining us. She might be having some tech issues, so let's give her a second to join in with us. As we're waiting for Sarah, I'm going to give folks the permission to continue to utilize the chat and ask any questions about Young Invincibles or our young adult engagement programs, or maybe a little bit more about some of our other chapters across the United States or our federal office. So if you have any questions, I'm going to monitor the chat as we wait for our guest presenter to join on in with us. And I do see lots of young adult alumni with us. So welcome to folks that have graduated from our programming and you're still hanging in there with us and joining us. We appreciate it. I am troubleshooting with our guest presenter, so give us a few more minutes so we can help her join on in. And it looks like we're on Facebook Live too. How exciting. So if you guys are on Facebook, feel free to share that out. And everyone that registered, I also shared out our social media toolkit. So in the social media toolkit, you could also share information about our event. We shared graphics and language with you if that helps you with any of your social media posts. But feel free to share that out and help promote our event and let folks know that you've been joining us. All right. I think Sarah from Emerson Street might be in. Sarah, were you able to join with us?
Yes.
Hello. How are you
Hi.
doing?
I'm good. It took me just a few minutes to finagle it, but I'm here.
No worries. And Kira, would you mind giving Sarah co-host capability so she could share her screen and I could stop sharing mine?
All right. Oops. Okay. So I'm going to show you all. I'm going to use a PowerPoint here. So let me pull it up. Sorry, again, still trying to figure out my Zoom isn't as good as my Teams because that's what I'm used to. Let's let's see here, slideshow. Let's do from the beginning. Okay, hopefully you can hear that. And if you cannot hear it, just stop me from talking and I'll make it so you can. So I have about 25 minutes to present to you and I have exactly 25 slides. So I'm going to go through things fairly quickly, but I want to make sure that I leave some time for people to ask questions too. So my name is Sarah. I work as an education specialist at Emerson Street. Oops, I don't know what I just did. Let me check something before I continue. Okay, as long as you can see them, that's the good part. So you can hear me, right? Yes, it says talking. Okay, I'm Sarah Shipman. I work as an education specialist at Emerson Street. So at Emerson Street, what I do there is I meet with people and I also, it looks like I need to let somebody else join. Hold on. Wish I was a little bit, like I said, a little bit savvier.
I don't see anyone in the waiting
Oh,
room, so
here we
can.
go. Okay, I just admitted someone, so hopefully I got it right. Okay, cool. All right, start over. Again, Sarah, education specialist. So 50% of my job is spent helping people that have mental health challenges sort of navigate educational systems. That includes both high school and colleges, as well as grad school for some, and trade schools and apprenticeships, sort of everything that runs the gamut of education. That's 50% of my job, and I meet with people individually and oftentimes the schools to do that as well. I also have a background in music and art, so I can also work with people on improving their art skills, and I do teach piano and voice lessons when I have the ability to do so. The other 50% of my job is spent in groups. So I have a background in art therapy, and I worked as an art therapist in the juvenile justice field for about 12 years. It was wonderful, and I did like it a whole lot. So let me tell you a little bit about Emerson Street. So Emerson Street is with the Mental Health Center of Denver. We are working for people between the ages of 15 and 26. It's a really unique and very cool location. It is in the Capitol Hill district. If anybody has ever been over to the Fillmore Theater, we're right over there. It is a 4-story mansion that is painted in brilliant colors on the inside, as far as like bright greens and pinks and yellows and everything else. We've got a couple of, you can see actually from here that we've got a couple balconies out there too. And what we do is we provide therapy services for people between the ages of 15 and 26. Now, when I say that we provide therapy services, that runs the gamut of just individual therapy, group therapy, family therapy. Then we also have education services, which I provide, and we also have employment services, which our employment team provides. We also have one case manager on staff that is able to go out in the community and does things like delivering food boxes through the pandemic, and also helps deliver medications. Our program director is a PsyD, and our assistant program director is also an education specialist like I am. They're both in this picture here. We have a lot of fun at Emerson Street. It's a really unique place. One of the reasons it was founded was because they found that people between the ages of 15 and 26 were very much falling off in the mental health field. What was happening is the 15-year-olds were commonly being lumped in with 10, 11, and 12-year-olds, and then the people that were 18 and over were then being lumped in with 46-year-olds and 50-year-olds, and they didn't feel like they fit. So Emerson Street, they sought out a really unique location in the Cap Hill district, as well as a really unique sort of environment too. We've got giant bean bags and we've got a popcorn machine set up. We've got a video game room. So if people are feeling overwhelmed during therapy, sometimes they'll go downstairs with their therapist and they'll play video games while they do therapy. The other thing that we also do is we have a ton of instruments around the building. So we're working on getting a piano. We've got some guitars. We do have a music therapist on staff. She is our Phoenix therapist. Our Phoenix program is for young people experiencing their first episode of psychosis. And we have a wraparound team for people experiencing that first episode of psychosis, because we know that research says the earlier you have interventions with young people experiencing that, the better off the treatment outcomes wind up. So we also have, like I said, we have individual group therapy and family therapy. We also have people that specialize in different things. We've got a music therapist on staff, art therapy here. We have people that specialize in addiction. We also have people that specialize in EMDR, which is a great treatment for trauma. And then we also have people that specialize in family therapy as well. The cool thing about Emerson Street is there really is a lot of different therapists that can help with different things. And then we also offer those wraparound services because we do know people that are struggling with mental health challenges typically do better if they're also actively engaged in school or work or both. So our employment specialists then also work with people on finding a job, building a resume. They do job coaching, and then they also do some coaching for interviews, and they're able to take people around in the community, and they have built relationships much like our education specialists work like with people at the Auraria campus. We also have our employment specialists that have different employment opportunities in the community. That's just a little bit about Emerson Street. I really wish I could show you guys like the unique building because it is truly amazing. We have a lot of fun there. I did forget to mention the 50% of my job where I run groups, run what is called prevention level groups. We are doing that virtually. Now, what that looks like is next Wednesday, we're meeting from 1 to 4:30. We're having a gratitude celebration. So we're going to be making pumpkin pies, and then we're going to watch a movie. And we also play a lot of online games like Uno. And we recently started playing Among Us, which everybody really likes. And then we also have some other virtual games. We also do virtual art tutorials. Next week, we're going to start diamond painting. We also do, on Fridays, we do movies. Now, when we're meeting in person, we do things like karaoke, and we have the art groups, we have henna, we do mask making. We always have a cooking group too, and we have a cooking group still virtually on Thursdays. These groups, how we're running it virtually is if you sign up for a kit, then you get the kit delivered to your house by an employment specialist, and they are all free. So if you are between the ages of 15 and 26, you can sign up to do these groups for free. So it's pretty cool. The other thing that we offer at Emerson Street too is once we start for in-person services again, we offer some really cool opportunities in the community. So we've gone to musicals. We did have tickets to Lion King, but they canceled that. We also take them, we take a group of young people up to Winter Park and take them skiing. We partner with the National Sports Center for the Disabled, and we partner with them so that we stay there, and we stay in Winter Park for 3 days, 2 nights, in kind of a cool Airbnb that's got a game room and a hot tub, and we cook together. And then the first day that we're there, we spend at Winter Park, and you get partnered with a coach who will teach you how to ski or snowboard. It's up to you. And then the next day that we are there, we go tubing, and that's our big winter retreat. Again, free of charge. So lots of cool opportunities at Emerson Street, and lots of, like I said, different types of therapists and therapy. Okay, next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about the definition of mental health. So what is mental health? Mental health refers to maintenance of successful mental health activity that includes productive daily activities and maintaining fulfilling relationships with others. It also includes maintaining the abilities to adapt, to change, and cope with stress, which we all know a lot about right now, right? There's been a lot of having to adapt and sort of be flexible. The one thing that I always like to highlight when we're talking about mental health is it is a spectrum. And the reason I like to highlight this is because we always think of physical health as being a spectrum, which it is. You know, some people they're in really good physical health. Some people's physical health needs some work. Mental health is the same way. Every single person has mental health. It's just, where do you fall on the spectrum, right? Is it actually impacting your daily life, any of the struggles that you're having with mental health? So it's really important to remember that when you're discussing mental health with people, that everybody has mental health. It's just where you fall on the spectrum, right? So if you're in that kind of red area that we were just looking at, the idea would be to go and see somebody that would assist you with your mental health. And just as with your physical health, you would go to a doctor, also with your mental health, you might want to see a therapist, or have a meeting with a case manager, or just even go in for an intake and call. We also have a lot of resources as far as crisis lines and walk-in centers across Denver. Mental health challenges can occur when the brain or part of the brain is not working. When these signs, again, when they significantly disrupt the life, of somebody, that's when we're talking about how it could be on that spectrum part where you might need to come in and see somebody. There are six major functions of the brain. Obviously, there's a lot more than that, but there are six major functions that are impacted with mental health challenges. We have our thinking. So thinking, it might show up as sort of distorted, what we call distorted thinking, or I want to say, gosh, I can't think of the word that I'm thinking of. Distorted thinking or thought. I can't think of it, it's gone. But it might look at like black and white thinking. Everything is black and white. It also might look like making a mountain out of a molehill or catastrophizing. So there are actually, I remember the word, thinking errors that people have when they're struggling with mental health challenges. Blended sort of with thinking is perception. So for perception, that could look like paranoia. It could look like nobody likes me. It could look like she only said that because she's out to get me. It could look like my perception is my boss wants to fire me. So it's really your perception of what's happening in the world and how you're interacting. So thinking and perception go together, right? The other portion that's affected is emotions. And again, that's going to run the gamut of emotions. We know we can run from happy to sad to furious to peaceful, all of those things. And then we also talk a little bit about neurotransmitters in this sort of training that we do. When we talk about neurotransmitters, we also have psychiatrists at Emerson Street and at the Mental Health Center of Denver. So the psychiatrist can also really help when there is a neurotransmitter issue that's happening. A lot of the times, the ones that you're going to hear the most are serotonin and dopamine. And what they do is they really take a look at what's going to be helpful for you. And I always say that medication in psychiatry, it's a lot like 31 flavors, like Baskin Robbins, because some people can really like a medication and other people might not have the same reaction to it. So it's really about finding something that fits for you. And that isn't to say that everybody needs medication, but it is definitely an option, and it is a part of the brain that is affected. We also talk about physical, what mental health challenges look like when people are having problems physically. Now, again, this runs the gamut of just maybe not wanting to get out of bed, not having any energy. Maybe it looks like my stomach hurts all the time, stress hives. It could look like a lot of different things with physical. I oftentimes when I'm talking about anxiety and stress, I ask people to pick an area of their body that feels really affected. I know one of my old coworkers used to say she could always tell when she's stressed out because her shoulders would get to the point where they were almost touching her ears. So that's sort of one example of how it can affect the physical part of the brain. And then behavioral, again, not getting out of bed. It can also look like hygiene issues. Um, Maybe it can look like aggressive behavior. There, again, it runs the gamut, but these are the six major functions that are impacted by mental health challenges. Okay, so signs and symptoms, we kind of just went over this. I'll give you guys a brief, I'm not going to read everything to you. I will look and see if I missed anything. So we talk about delusions, and we also talk a little bit about paranoia when we're talking about that too. People hear a lot of that in conjunction with schizophrenia, but schizophrenia doesn't, or psychosis, I'm sorry. It doesn't just mean delusions and or hallucinations. It can have a lot of different things. Let's see, substance use. You'll see substance use in conjunction with mental health issues because so many times people have learned to use substances as a coping tool, and unfortunately, it doesn't always work, or it works in the beginning and then it just causes more mental health challenges later on. Okay, causes of mental health challenges. So genetics play a role in this. In the mental health field, we do this thing called a genogram, which is really quite cool. It looks a lot like a family tree, but a genogram actually, instead of mapping out just who your ancestors are, it actually maps out usually up to 3 or 4 generations back the mental health challenges that have happened, the physical challenges that they have had, and then also death date, birth date, and what they died of. The reason that we do that in the mental health field is because it gives us a really good snapshot of what we're going to be dealing with when we see a mental health challenge. Because oftentimes, if depression is in, if your grandfather or your father struggled with that, then there's a very good chance that you might struggle with it as well. That goes for addiction too, and it also goes. There's this really fascinating book. I think it's called I don't know, something Journey Road, that just came out about a family of people. They had 7 children and all, no, they had 9 children and 7 of them were diagnosed with schizophrenia, and they were all the boys in the family that were diagnosed with this. Now, this happened in 1950, I believe, and that gave us a lot of the current information that we know genetically about that particular mental health challenge. So again, genetics play a huge role when we're talking about that. Same with anxiety. I mean, basically every single thing that you can talk about. Environment also comes into play when we're talking about causes of mental health issues. Now, there are two different ways to look at the environment. So we're going to talk globally about the broad environment, right? So right now, we know with what's happening in the world, there's a lot of different challenges out there in our environment that are going to impact mental health issues that are happening right now. Just within this last year, we have had a pandemic. We have had an election, and we have also had a huge movement in the Black Lives Matter movement, right? So those three things are something that we commonly hear just right now in our environment that is affecting people. Now, the other thing when we talk about environment, we can talk about it being a little bit closer to home. So particularly your neighborhood, where you grew up, the home that you're living in, whether it's safe, whether you feel safe, that can also affect mental health. And then let's also talk about the actual environment as far as the earth and the things that we're putting in our bodies and whatnot. That also can have a big impact with mental health issues. The fires are a really good example of that we had this summer. There were a lot of fires, and I know that caused a lot of anxiety for people, just seeing the ash come from the air or seeing the very orange sunsets that we were seeing have an impact. We've already talked about neurotransmitters and chemical imbalance as a cause. That's what we call a more organic issue. So if your brain isn't producing enough of a certain neurotransmitter or chemical, that can become an issue. And then finally, trauma, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about, which I'm going to try not to talk too much about it, can also be a cause of that. Okay, let's see here. Next up. I like this slide. I'm going to make it really quick. Mental health challenges are not imaginary. They're very real and very common when we're talking about mental health challenges. It's very important for us to use a strength-based approach. So one of the things which I feel like the younger generation has a good grasp of this. I shouldn't say the younger generation, but I feel like people that are following mental health issues currently have a better grasp of this. It's really important not to say that person is schizophrenic or that person is PTSD. What you say is they have it. And I like this slide just based on the name tags, because you wouldn't introduce yourself as, hi, I am strep throat, right? So it's more of that person has this, not they are this, if that makes sense. Now, if I could see you guys and I was in the room with you, this is the slide where I would say everybody who knows somebody or has struggled themselves with a mental health issue, raise your hand. And almost everybody, every single time, raises their hand. Because it's very common. 1 in 4 people has a mental illness. I wonder if that number is a little bit higher, right? So we know that mental health challenges affect people across the board, regardless of age, ethnicity, geographical location, all of that stuff. Let's see here. A lot of the times treatment can really, really assist people with mental health issues. Okay. Now, it did say that my internet connection was unstable, so I'm just going to leave it up to you all to let me know if there's an issue. Something that's really important when we're talking about mental health challenges is stigma. I want the concentration of this slide. 95% of homicides are committed by people not diagnosed with a mental diagnosis.
We may have lost Sarah. Can everyone hear me? Just put in the chat or give me a thumbs up. Okay. Let's give her a second to see if she could join us. But I do want to highlight that today's purpose for gathering together was to talk about mental health stigma. And so after Sarah wraps up her discussion on just a typical mental health 101 with us, we are going to be welcoming again 3 young adults that are going to hopefully help destigmatize the conversation of mental health. And we're going to focus a lot on why we at Young Invincibles think it's important to destigmatize it. So really think about the word stigma as we move forward with our event. And we are going to just hang tight and see if Sarah is able to continue to join with us. And if not, that's all right. We will move forward with our next guest. Let's give her a few more minutes.
Can you guys hear me? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So I only have about 5 minutes left. I can go through really quickly the next couple of slides if you want me to, or I can open it up for questions right now because I know I just gave you a whole lot of information. I did want to talk about the challenges and barriers with mental health, and the other thing that I didn't get to speak about are specifically diversity issues when it comes to mental health. Mostly talking about people of color and LGBTQ youth that we're sort of addressing and how we're addressing that, because there's, unfortunately, the way the slide was going to go into that was there's a lot of stigma, and there's also a lot of barriers and challenges to diverse communities. Yes, it is absolutely possible to have access to those slides. But I want to give you guys, I want to give you all enough time to sort of ask questions. And open it up in the next 5 minutes for questions that you might have for me.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. So if everyone wants to put their questions in the chat box, I will monitor it in addition to Sarah monitoring it.
Let's see, does this webinar count as continuing education hours? I have no idea. I don't believe so. Daniela says, are you serving more youth now than before? I would say we've got a pretty steady stream. So 2 weeks ago, let's see, probably about a month ago, there was a huge uptick as far as education services went, and we also are having a big influx of people coming in. So I would say yes, we are serving quite a few youth right now, and we're running all of our programming virtually. How can I join the Emerson Street program? So all you need to do, I'm gonna have to pull this up. I'm sorry. Let's see here. It's called the Mental Health Center of Denver Access Program. Now, specifically speaking, if you want to, I'm pulling information up. I'm going to give you my email address because I realized that that you might have questions after I leave. I'm going to give you my email address, and you can also ask any questions to me directly. Just shoot me an email. I'm on there about 10 hours Tuesday through Friday. Let's see here. Nope, I sent it to a direct message. Knew that was going to happen. Let's see here. Everyone in the meeting, here we go. Anyway, so the Mental Health Center of Denver, if you call their access center, you can get involved with therapy and case management and or whatever. You do an intake with them, basically. And then when you call, tell them that you specifically want to be seen through the Emerson Street program if you're there for therapy. Now, if it's for prevention level programming, your contact is me. So that's all of those kind of fun groups going. We do have a volunteer position that's open right now that we're working with a volunteer. I'm sorry, it's not open. We're working with a tutor. Typically, it takes a lot it doesn't take a lot, but there is certain training that you need to go through in order to be sort of vetted on as a volunteer through the Mental Health Center of Denver. So some training and they also do, background checks and that sort of thing. So you have to go through all of that, and then you would come to the Emerson Street program. The other thing that I would say too is a great way to know the Emerson Street program is if you're between those ages of 15 and 26, just come in and check out one of our prevention level programs to get involved in and I didn't mention that, so I'm so glad that you asked. We also have peer-led groups. So frequently, it's really important at Emerson Street for us to provide people with the opportunity, the young people with the opportunity to say, hey, I think this is missing or this is lacking in your programming, so I want to be part of making it happen. We've done some Dungeons and Dragons groups. We've had a girl that led a history group for us. We also had art as activism that was led by youth. Prevention programming is really important to the youth because what we're trying to do is get people less involved with not less involved, but I want to say it's exactly what it sounds like. It's prevention. It prevents mental health issues. We're trying to promote connection to other youth and as well as people in the community, and that connection can be extremely important to prevent sort of decline in mental health, if that makes sense. Did I cover that? Providing services in other languages. So we do not have anybody specifically. We're able to provide in a lot of different languages. When we do have groups, we don't have anybody that speaks. At this point, I don't believe that we have anybody that is fluent in any languages other than English, but we also have a language line that we use. We also have interpreters that we frequently use, and the interpreters are available for groups as well as individuals as well. So I mean, I use the interpreter quite frequently, as you all can imagine. And our interpreters, our interpreters are a great team, and they're also very helpful. Our admin assistant, so if you ever called the Emerson Street line that's listed publicly, our admin assistant is fluent in both English and Spanish, so she can help out with that as well. Yeah. Do we have to be in Denver to access services? That is such a good question, and I feel like I shouldn't answer it because I don't know the real answer to that question. As far as prevention level services, the answer to that question is we're doing things virtually. We welcome everybody for prevention. So no, come on in until I get told no, which I might get told no. I don't know. As far as the other services, I would really encourage you to contact our access line to see what they can offer for therapy and that sort of thing. We do offer sliding scale services. So payment works in those cases. You would contact our financial assistance programming, and they will help you decide where you would fall on that sliding scale. We also accept a lot of different insurances, including Medicaid, and really the gamut of different insurances that are offered. How do I expect mental health would change in future years? Me personally, I just hope, stigma. I mean, there is still a huge amount of stigma with mental health, even though there are a lot of education opportunities that there weren't, 20, 30, 40 years ago. But I definitely am hopeful that there's just going to be more awareness of it, and there's going to be more opportunities for people seeking treatment, because there are barriers for communities when it comes to seeking mental health treatment. Especially, we do have some great opportunities here in Denver, but I know in smaller communities it can be really hard. And going back to that diversity piece, it can also be very, very difficult to make sure that we are offering our services and make sure that every person is able to get those services. So my hope is that the awareness continues to increase around that. And also as providers, I hope that our education, that we continue to highlight the importance of diversity in the workplace as well as with the people that we're working with. I think it's really, really important. Okay, love to know more about art therapy training for adult allies. You can always email me and we can chat a little bit more. I went to Naropa in Boulder, so that's where I received my degree. They have some really cool art therapy programs there. At least they used to. I don't know. It's been a while since I've been there, but I'm sure that they do. And we do offer some art therapy groups. And then the other question that I saw was music therapy as well. So if you've got specific questions, I can hook you up with Casey Erisman's email, and you can also send her questions as well. Before I leave, I do want to put one thing in the chat, and that's our Access Center's phone number. And then I also am going to it's going to take me a minute so you all can continue doing what you need to do. But I also want to include the crisis number hotline as well. And the crisis numbers can be used anytime, 24/7, any day of the week. You can text them and you can call them. A lot of the people that we work with really prefer the texting option. But if that's something that you are interested in doing, or it's also just good information to have on hand if you're working with people right now.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. We really appreciate that. I'm also going to be sharing out the Colorado Crisis Hotline and NAMI's NAMI's hotline as well for crises. So we really appreciate you joining us. And I'll be sure as a follow-up to share out a PDF version of your slides and then any contact information you think would be helpful to connect folks.
Okay, Access Center, MHP. I'm just gonna put this in the slide and then I'll be out of your hair. Or
No
not in the
problem.
slide, but in the chat.
Sounds great. Well, as Sarah's doing that, I just want to thank Emerson Street, particularly Sarah, one more time. Emerson Street's been a partner with Young Invincibles for a while now, and they always volunteer to come in and facilitate a mental health 101 training with their young adult SNO programming. So just another really big shout out and a big thank you, Sarah, for always being such a wonderful partner with Young Invincibles. All right. So as I mentioned, we're going to have some young adults join us here in a few minutes to share their personal stories. But I wanted to share a few statewide stats for you to think about. And I'm not going to go through these word by word, but a few that jumped out to me as Young Invincibles was doing research was Colorado is ranked 47th overall in the country. Indicating that we have a high prevalence of mental health or mental illnesses and lower access to care. So that was a report done by Mental Health America. You could also see Colorado's suicide rate in comparison to our national rate. You could see that the majority of Coloradans believe that mental health is a very serious or extremely serious problem in the state, and that there has been an increase since 2017 to 2019 in people reporting poor mental health. And this could be a sign that mental health has worsened within the state, but it could also be a sign that people are more willing to talk about it as well. So think about those, and then also, again, think about the word stigma and how it might relate to mental health, and not only how you may face stigma with other people in your life, but also think about self-stigma. So I am so excited to introduce our next guest presenters. We are going to welcome Sarah Sterin, Brenna Giblin, and Alyssa Casillas to just share their mental health stories with us and why they think it's important that we have to destigmatize the conversation. So, Sarah Sterin, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Thank you, Cam. Appreciate it. So a college campus really has tremendous influencing power in validating and supporting a student suffering from a mental health crisis. Researcher Brene Brown says that shame cannot survive empathy. But yet, to many students living with mental health issues, shame is an everyday accompaniment to our struggles. Yet most campuses fail to provide an empathetic environment to support us. When I was 19, I was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. I was beginning my sophomore year of college, and my friends and family watched in confusion as I went from a passionate and high-achieving student to someone who refused to leave my bedroom. I was desperately self-medicating and coping with an overwhelming shame that ultimately led me down a path of depression, substance abuse, eating disorders, and self-harm. I couldn't hold down a job, I stopped going to classes, and effectively withdrew from every social group that I ambitiously signed up for freshman year. Like so many others, the shame and stigma surrounding mental health issues kept me siloed and alone. My university absolutely had a responsibility to support me. I was a teenager who was assaulted on their campus, but even without that, my university had a responsibility to show me empathy and provide me with an environment where I was truly empowered to learn. And my dog also feels very passionate about what I'm saying right now, which is why you're hearing very excited moans in the background. But the moral of the story was that professors and admin repeatedly ended up taking absenteeism and lack of engagement as disrespect. I lost my university scholarship because I was unable to keep a full-time schedule and eventually had to take time off school because I was experiencing frequent panic attacks on campus and could no longer afford to attend. But it didn't have to be that way. What if my school did know how to respond? What if professors understood how to recognize signs of trauma? What if financial aid allowed for a pause for medical withdrawals? What if, when I disclosed, I was connected to community resources and consistent counseling? Any of those things could have made the difference in my undergraduate experience that would have allowed me to stay on track. And any of those things could have lessened my shame. As isolated as I have felt my mental health struggles, my experience is not an isolated one. Countless people suffer in this way, and it is imperative that we build systems that support connection, validation, and reasonable modifications for students. My university could have made the difference in my undergraduate experience, but did not have the mental health networks in place to support me or any other students going through what I was. It's not just okay to talk about mental health, but it actively changes and saves lives. The more we're able to get real about what we're struggling with and able to get real help from our institutions or awesome organizations like Emerson Street, the more we break down that surrounding stigma and shame. If shame can't survive empathy, let's create a space where people can be seen and supported to their greatest potential without fear of stigma or judgment. Let's make it okay to not be okay and demand that our schools take an active role in the mental health of all students. That's what a healthy campus would look like to me. And I thank you all for the space to share in vulnerability today.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for sharing your story and just being very open about your experience and your recommendations and the supports you think you could have benefited from. Our next guest who's going to share their story is Brenna Giblin. So everyone, please virtually welcome Brenna to share her story next.
Thanks, Cam. Hi, everybody. My name's Brenna, and I would like you guys all to imagine a world with mental health checkups each year. When I was in middle school, my brother became extremely depressed. Most nights, I would not be able to sleep because my brother would be pounding on the couch that sat outside in the living room right behind my bedroom wall. It kept me awake at night. I would lay in the dark, worrying for the safety of him and my parents and my family. I was afraid he might do something he regretted. He was so depressed that nearly every day was filled with screaming, yelling, and anxiety in our house. My parents' minds were focused so much on him and his depression that I often felt alone. And I wasn't the only one. Imagine if they had caught my brother's depression and anxiety earlier. My youngest sister was 7 or 8 years old when my brother became depressed. Because his depression lasted for years, often or almost until he was out of high school, her childhood was filled with anxiety. Due to this environment, and possibly due to genetics, she developed crippling anxiety. She still battles with it to this day. My brother and sister were not the only ones who developed anxiety. My grandmother had it too, and I also work on controlling my anxiety each day as well. Honestly, I'm nervous right now. If they had caught my brother's anxiety and depression at an earlier checkup, at a yearly checkup, then perhaps his depression would not have reached the levels it did, and perhaps my sister would not have crippling anxiety. I know we can see a brighter world. Thank you guys for listening to my story.
Again, thank you so much, Brenna, for sharing your story with us and for being vulnerable with us. All right. And finally, I would like to introduce Alyssa Casillas.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and allowing us to share our stories with you. Before I begin with my story, I want you to imagine a world where going to the doctor for your yearly physical included a mental health checkup, and then you were referred to a therapist who looked like you and could identify with the world you come from. Now imagine a world where it's okay not to be okay, a world where people support one another in common struggles instead of stigmatizing and shunning each other because of mental health challenges. When I was 18 years old, my childhood best friend killed herself, and I've never been the same. I found myself depressed, hating the world, self-medicating with alcohol and avoidance. I went to therapy very soon after she died, and it was terrible. The therapist had her mind made up before I even walked in that I needed to be on medication. I felt unheard and was convinced that therapy wouldn't work for me. Fast forward to August 2015, just 5 months after she died, I was moving away from home and starting college for the first time. I cried nearly every day for a month. I had lost faith in the goodness of the world, in others, and in myself. Almost 1 year later, I went back to therapy, and it was a Band-Aid on a wound that needed so much more. I can only imagine what my life could have been like and would be like now if I could have had a more holistic therapy experience and preventative mental health care. I needed so much more than just the 6 free counseling sessions that my institution provided. Now, I do not want to discredit the help I did receive, but I know there were some things I just couldn't talk about with my therapist. I didn't feel the connection that comes along with talking to someone who I could identify with. Someone who identified as Latina or Latino and understood the world I come from. I would have been able to talk about what it was like dealing with depression from my trauma and my imposter syndrome as a woman of color on a predominantly white campus. I could have talked about my relationship with my religious upbringing and how my feelings of anger and guilt were compounded and conflicted by religion and community. Admittedly, I could have done more, but at the time I was just incapable, and the systems I was a part of had a duty to do better and to do more. Higher education institutions have a duty to protect and care for their students. Healthcare providers have a duty to their clients and patients to make mental health care a priority. I ask that we hold higher education institutions and healthcare systems accountable to not just step in after a crisis, but before. Mental health care needs to be proactive and have a sense of urgency and investment before a crisis happens. I also ask that we as a community and as individuals step up for ourselves and each other. Your story matters, so tell it. Tell it to someone you trust, or even just tell it to yourself. Tell your truth, even if your voice shakes, and remember, you are not alone.
All right. Thank you so much, Alyssa. And I just want to give another thank you to Sarah and Brenna as well, who were, again, very brave to share their experiences with us and to share their recommendations of what they think would have been helpful for them and could hopefully be helpful for others that might be in similar positions for them. So let's all just take a deep breath, because that is a lot of information to take in. We understand at Young Invincibles, hearing other stories may be triggering. And so I do want to remind you that as a follow-up to this event, we're going to be sharing a resource page that was made by young adults for young adults. But because we're not sharing that with you right this instance, I just wanted to quickly share the National Alliance for Mental Health, their crisis helpline, as well as their texting line. And then if you're located here in Colorado, specifically the Colorado Crisis Services as well. So they have a phone number and a line you could text. The resource page that we're going to be sharing with you, I know we have folks from across the country outside of Colorado joining us. So there are going to be some national resources available to you as well. And we recommend that you could connect with your local chapter in Young Invincibles if you need more local resources, and they might know of partner organizations to refer you to. But for folks that are joining from Colorado, we are going to be providing a list of sliding scale resources for you as well. So if you don't know what sliding scale is, if you don't have health insurance, which a lot of young adults don't, it's important to know which providers offer sliding scale services, because most of the time they'll just ask that you can pay what you can rather than a flat fee that they usually associate for most of their clients. So just know that will be available to you as a follow-up to this webinar. All right. So you heard a little bit more about what mental health is, some brief descriptions of what stigma may look like, or brief descriptions of normal mental health illnesses. And you've heard from our young adults about some of their struggles, and you come to this webinar, I'm assuming with, struggling yourself, witnessing one of your friends or family members struggling, or just wanting to just get more involved with mental health advocacy. So let me tell you a little bit more about what Young Invincibles is trying to do here in Colorado to tackle some of these barriers that our young adults are facing. So we have something that we've been working on called the Healthy Minds Designation Checklist, and I'm so excited to share information about this. As a little background information, I'm going to go to the next slide real quick and I'll come back to this, but this checklist was 100% created by young adults, and mostly young adults that have been in our programming. So this checklist kind of stemmed organically from our young adults and their experiences. As I mentioned at the earlier time of our webinar, we got specific funding to work directly on mental health advocacy and policy changes at the institutional level. And when we had young adults in our programming, what happened was they came into our office. They said, mental health is important to me. This is what I'm experiencing, and this is what I want to see changed. And we said, great, that's wonderful. Let's work with your institution to get those policy changes. So we worked with local institutions, like all 3 of the institutions on their area campus, including University of Colorado, Denver, Metropolitan State University, and Community College of Denver. We also worked with larger institutions like CU Boulder. We worked with other community colleges like Arapahoe Community College, and we worked with private institutions like Denver University. And we had students in our programming that came to us and said, these are the gaps they're seeing. And they went back to their campus and they went to go see if their peers were experiencing the same kind of struggles and barriers. And from there, they came back and they said, this is what we found. This is the data we have. This is who we talked to. And we're going to do some research on some recommendations. Based off of that, they came up with some awesome solutions. So at the Raritan campus, we noticed that there are great services there, but there's so many students going in and out on that tri-level institution campus. They don't know what services are offered to who. They don't know where they're located at. How can we easily reach all those students? And so some of our young adults in the programming said, let's just put the crisis hotline on the back of every student ID. We think that's affordable. We think that's something we could do. And we think that's some way that we could reach students on campus. And so from there, we went to talk to institutional leadership at all 3 of those campuses, or all 3 of those institutions, sorry. And they said, that's a great idea, let's do it. And they partnered with Young Invincibles to get that rolled out and to have that crisis hotline on the back of every student ID. We worked with CU Boulder to draft some language that is now available to faculty to let folks know where their resources are located, and they could see that language on the back of every syllabi. So that language is available to faculty if they want to use it for their syllabus. We heard from students at DU that they thought there was a lack of cultural representation within their counseling services. You may have heard Alyssa say that she wished she was able to connect with someone on her campus that looked like her, maybe came from the same background, or maybe have experienced something similar to her. So we worked with DU to try to get that up and running. And then we worked with the Arapahoe Community College to get part-time counselors in the evening, knowing that community colleges usually have young adults that are working full-time and maybe taking evening classes, and they can't go in between 9 and 5 o'clock because they're working during those times to access those services. So we saw, wow, this is something we could really do. The students led these initiatives. How can we reach more college campuses across the state? And from there, our young adults came up with the idea of a Healthy Minds designation checklist. Now, what this is a list of recommendations made by young adults in partnership with institutions, the Department of Higher Education, local providers, and counseling centers on institutions' campuses, based off of what we think students need. Now, if an institution completes the requirements on the checklist, they will get a state designation, basically saying, hey, the state recognizes this institution as a Healthy Minds campus, meaning if you're a student and your mental health is a priority, this is probably a good institution for you to attend, because we know that the state recognizes the institution is implementing programs that are maybe preventative, they're thinking about self-care, they're elevating student voices. So this is hopefully going to influence student decisions when applying for Colorado institutions. And this will also hopefully influence other institutions to earn the same designation. Now, there are a few different requirements, and I'm going to review them really briefly, but basically we came up with 4 core programs that we think every institution should implement in order to get this designation. And they're things that we think should be fairly easy to do, like adding the mental health crisis line to the back of every student ID or to their syllabus, offering preventative programs, offering a training during student orientation, and then also ensuring that students right now have access to online mental health support and community resources, because now during COVID, people aren't feeling safe to go to anything in person. So we think that's very imperative. And then in addition to those 4 core programs, we also think that they need to implement 6 focused initiatives. And those focused initiatives are separated into different buckets, like accessibility, awareness, and prevention. So a few a few examples of accessible information is a counseling staff directory that includes a short biography letting students know if that counselor has culturally competency training, or maybe indicating if they identify as LGBTQ or is a certain demographic, so that student knows, hey, I might identify with this counselor ahead of time. An example of an awareness program that we thought of was sending out text messaging alerts after a crisis may happen on or near your campus. So for the college students that are with us, you may notice that sometimes if there's a shooting nearby, there'll be a text message that's sent to your phones warning you. Well, what we found is that this can be really triggering for students. And so we think that the institution should follow up with some kind of information around mental health supports when they're sending out those kind of messages. And then an example of a preventative program is to offer evidence-based mental health training for the faculty and staff on the institution that has online accessibility, like mental health first aid training. And we have a long list of other programs we recommend that fit within those focused initiatives. But the good news about this is that the Colorado Department of Higher Education is getting ready to roll out this checklist in mid-December. And so all the students in Colorado should be able to have access to this checklist, and you'll be able to see what's on this checklist. And again, the goals of the checklist is to emphasize prevention, self-care, provide resources for substance use disorders and recovery, ensure that there's culturally competent and accessible services. We really want to elevate the student voice and ensure that students are involved with the checklist, not only to help cultivate it and develop it, but stay engaged with it after it's rolled out and maybe reevaluating it every few years. And then ensuring that there is accessible information for student services. So that's one initiative that we've been working closely with the Department of Higher Education on. And again, 100% created by young adults for young adults. And the next thing is actually some legislation. So now during the 2021 legislative session, we are ready to bring back a bill called the Mental Health Annual Wellness Checkup Bill. And what this is similar to when you go to your primary care provider usually to get a physical. What we're asking is that you should be able to get a mental health visit as well. Sarah Shipman from Emerson Street mentioned that we should be treating our mental health similar to our physical health. You heard some of our young adults mention that we should be getting checkups similar to our physical health. And we think this is a solution that we could propose and would be beneficial for Colorado residents. And so we're happy to be able to work with Representative Michael St-Jeannet, who introduced it in the 2020 legislative session. And we're going to be ready and ready to fight and bring this back this year. And so there's a short little definition there that kind of goes through what we mean by mental health checkup, like services such as behavioral health screenings, some education, or doing some consulting on healthy lifestyle changes, referrals to ongoing treatment, any other mental health services, or discussion of potential options for medication. And so we really want to normalize saying, hey, it's that time of year, I need to just go get my mental health checkup and see how I'm doing, because you, similar to your physical health, you may not notice. And it's always important to just take that extra step to be preventative. So I'm gonna do a quick time check. It is 3:41. And I thought I was running behind on time. So what I'm going to do is move forward, and if you have any questions about the Healthy Minds checklist or the Mental Health Annual Wellness Checkup Bill, please just throw it in the chat, and I'm going to check those at the end to see if we have any questions. So now that you know a little bit more about two of the initiatives we've been working on here in the Rocky Mountain office at Young Invincibles, I wanted to share some recommendations on how do you get involved. You heard again about a little bit more what mental health is and some basic definitions. You heard what some young adults in Colorado are facing. You now know some initiatives that you could get involved in or what some local organizations are working on. But what I recommend is if you're interested in sharing your story with Young Invincibles, you could definitely do that. It definitely doesn't have to be related to mental health. As I mentioned before, we do work within higher education as well, healthcare, civic engagement, and then workforce. Now, you could also reach out to your state legislator and ask them to support the mental health annual wellness checkup bill if you're located in Colorado. You could call them, you could email them, you should probably check their social media because right now everyone has social media, so see what their Twitter handle is. If you're located outside of Colorado, maybe check and see what other states are doing, what other initiatives they're working on, or maybe try to get something similar in your state up and running. And now that you know what we're working on here in Colorado. If you're a Colorado college student, I really encourage you after the mid part of December, and maybe when you come back from break, to reach out to leadership on your at your institution and encourage them to earn the Healthy Mind State designation. What we do know is that, again, institutions are doing wonderful things in regards to providing mental health services. And so what we're hoping is that this is basically just highlighting their work and kind of sharing more with their students and with the community what they're doing. And hopefully it's going to be an easy thing for them to earn that state designation. And again, educate yourself about policies and solutions that are happening in your community, at your school, in the state, or across the country. And please don't hesitate to reach out to Young Invincibles and ask how you could get involved with some of our initiatives we're working on. And the last thing I really want everyone to take away from this event is to talk about mental health. We're not asking you to share your experiences. We're not asking you to really tell us what kind of barriers maybe you faced, but talk about it. Let's not make it a taboo conversation. The whole point of this is to try to destigmatize the conversation. So it's so important for us to just say the words mental health and that you have mental health and it's okay. Everyone does. So let's just get in the habit of talking about it, just like Alyssa, Brenna, and Sarah did today. All right, so we are doing great on time. It is 3:44. I'm going to check the chat to see if we have any questions. Isabella, one of our young advocates, shared a link so you can find your Colorado state legislators by simply putting in your zip code. Is there any questions that anyone may have regarding the Healthy Minds designation checklist or the annual mental health checkup bill that we're working on? And as we're waiting for some questions, I just want to give a, let's see. My slides stopped working. I wanted to give a really big shout out to some of the young adults that made this happen. Unfortunately, Beatrice, her photo's not loading on here, but we have 6 wonderful young ladies who are currently in our Young Advocates program that made this event happen. And we wouldn't all be here today without their planning, without all of their organizing, without sending numerous emails to each of you, letting you know that this is happening and ensuring that this is a priority in their life. So I really just want to give a big shout out to Amy and Beatrice and Grace and Isabella, Kaylee, and Millie for making today happen. So I'm going to recheck the chat to see if we have any questions. How will institutions learn about the healthy checklist? Well, the great thing about this is that we, again, are partnering with our Colorado Department of Higher Education. And so because the Department of Education is really facilitating the conversations, most of the institutions know that this is already in the pipeline, but the Department of Higher Education is going to be sending out that official announcement to institutional leadership. And so all the institutions should know about it. Now, that's where students come in, though, and that's why we want to share this initiative with students, because for some reason, if this doesn't reach institutional leadership's desk or their email, or if it's not a priority for them at the time, we want to ensure that their students are calling them up and letting them know, like, hey, the department dropped this checklist. Have you seen it? Have you seen what programs are in it? Are you planning to earn a state designation? What does that look like? And so I think it's a really big partnership between the Department of Higher Education, nonprofit organizations like Young Invincibles, and student leadership to really hold these institutions accountable. And there will be a rollout of the checklist. So hopefully at the very least, institutions will see some press related to it. We had a question from Marissa asking, how are the 3 presenters doing now compared to when they first were dealing with their mental health issues? And what did they do to cope with it? So I definitely don't want to answer that on behalf of Brenna, Alyssa, or Sarah, but if one or a few of you want to maybe join in and answer that question that Marissa asked.
I can answer for myself. I think, and this answer is obviously in retrospect because back then I didn't know that this was the answer. But the first thing I think was just to admit what was happening to me. I couldn't accept my friend's death. I couldn't accept that, you know, now I was depressed. I couldn't even say those words. And a lot of that came from the stigma and shame that those words tend to carry when you don't grow up in a world where that's talked about. Now the pandemic hit, so I haven't found a therapist that fits for me, but before I regularly go to therapy, I find myself being able to cope better, to kind of deal with things now during the pandemic. I journal a lot. That seems to help just kind of get things out of my head, not be so in my own space of mind. And I really, really lean on my support system, my friends that were there, that had a connection to her, to bounce that off, and also my support system that is completely disconnected from it. I think both sides are great to have, and of course, you know, you need it all.
I can also share a little bit about where I am now, and other than under a blanket because the temperature in my room just dropped. But you know, it took a long time. It took a lot of commitment from myself to focus on my mental health, and that I was really, really lucky that I was able to get connected to therapies that worked for me. Some of the ones that were mentioned by Emerson Street earlier, like cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR. For me, the biggest thing was like the journey of self-discovery through it, I think was really important, and understanding how I was relating to some of the coping skills that I was using, and how I wanted to relate to them, and having, you know, a support system to help me through that process, hold me accountable. And then also, you know, one more thing is just community healing can also be really powerful. Like, I know many people, and there have been many times during my like recovery and growth and process that therapy hasn't been the right place for me, you know, and so I have leaned more on community healing. So I think it's being able to build those support networks, I think are really powerful.
Yeah, I want to completely echo what Alyssa and Sarah said. I think for my brother and for our family, it's taken time, you know, and patience and acceptance. He didn't get much better until just a year before he graduated. So the time really helps put things into perspective, as well as allows you to kind of figure out what works best for you. And so for our family, that was therapy, medicines, and my brother going off and doing his own thing, which has really been helpful to him. So it's just a matter of keeping your support around and ultimately going back to therapy if you need it, or just continuing therapy throughout your life, whatever it's specified to you and how you're going to deal with it.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to check the chat one more time. Last call for any questions that you might have. I'm sorry for going back and forth on the slides. I was trying to get Beatrice's photo brought up so you could see her pretty face as well. I'm not sure why it's not working. Well, my final thank yous to everyone that joined in today and decided to talk about mental health, make time for it, and to just learn a little bit more about how we could destigmatize it and how you could get involved with our initiatives, or maybe start thinking about other initiatives that you could start working on in your own community. So as a reminder, I will be following up with a mental health resource page that will be shared with you most likely on Monday of next week. My email address is there if you have any questions, and if you want to reach out to me about our mental health initiatives, our organization, our engagement programs, or maybe even trying to get in contact with the Mental Health Center of Denver, Sarah from Emerson Street, So please, whatever it may be, do not hesitate to reach out to me. So one big thank you to everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate all of your support, and I hope you have a wonderful and safe weekend.